In one terrifying night, every wallet in a small town turned empty, as if a dark shadow had stolen every hard-earned naira. No one saw it coming until whispers spread about three friends whose greed had turned dreams into nightmares. In a lively Nigerian town, not far from the busy streets of Lagos, there lived three close friends, Chidi, Emeka, and Obi. They grew up together in a modest neighborhood where sharing smiles was as common as sharing meals. Yet as they grew older, each of them began to feel the weight of poverty and the longing for wealth that seemed so far out of reach. Chidi was the thinker among them. He had a quick mind and a knack for numbers. Emeka was brave and bolder man who spoke his mind and dreamed big. Obi, gentle and kind-hearted, always had a soft voice that could calm the stormiest days. Together, they shared hopes and plans, always talking about a future where money would solve their troubles. One hot afternoon, as the sun began its slow journey west, the friends sat under a mango tree and talked about the unfairness in the world. They spoke about the crooked leaders, the long lines for jobs, and the endless struggles of the everyday person. In the midst of their worries, an idea was born. What if, Chidi suggested quietly, we could find a way to make money that would change everything? Emeka's eyes lit up, and Obi, though hesitant, listened closely. Chidi explained that if they could gather small amounts of money from many people by promising huge rewards in return, the little amounts might grow into a fortune. The idea seemed simple. Many people saved money, they thought, and many were willing to believe in a dream of quick, easy wealth. The plan was to start a scheme that would promise high returns on every naira invested, a promise that sounded too good to be true. And as it always happens with dreams that spin from greed, it was. The three friends began with a small, secret meeting. They talked about how to use trust and the power of belief. They set up a secretive club they called Golden Promise. In this club, they told people that the money invested would double in a short time. They drew simple charts on scraps of paper and told stories of ancient kings who had multiplied their fortunes by trusting wise men. The language was simple, and the ideas easy to grasp, just enough to spark hope in the hearts of the people. At first, only a few people joined. Neighbors who had saved every naira they could were among the first. They gave up a small part of what little they had, dreaming that tomorrow their lives would be easier. The scheme worked because it built on a simple truth. When people believe in an easy way to make money, they risk what is theirs in hope of a better future. As weeks passed, Golden Promise grew larger. Chidi was busy calculating numbers and making sure the promise of doubled money was not broken by mistakes if nothing went wrong. Emeka used his bold charm to travel to nearby towns and villages, spreading the word. Obi, with his gentle smile, would sit in small markets and tell people that their money could help not only themselves, but the whole community. Soon, the word spread like wildfire across the continent. People from different Nigerian states, and even from neighboring countries, began calling. At every door, the promise of easy wealth was whispered over simple meals and during quiet evenings under starry skies. Even far-off lands where people spoke different languages understood the tune of hope. The idea was universal money could be made if only one had faith in the promise. For a while, everything went smoothly. The friends celebrated every new member of Golden Promise as a sign of their rising success. Shops began to display little tokens of membership. Little trinkets were exchanged, symbolizing trust and hope. But as time passed, some whispered doubts. A wise old man in a village asked quietly, "If money grows, why must our pockets be empty for so long?" Yet many brushed these worries aside, blinded by the glimmer of riches promised. Chidi had begun to worry inside. Although his calculations were flawless on paper, he knew that a scheme built on promises that could not truly be met would always be fragile. Emeka laughed off the concerns and urged them to focus on the growing numbers. Obi, always the mediator, reassured the nervous few but secretly wondered if they were playing with fire. As Golden Promise grew, the friends decided it was time to take the scheme to a larger stage. They created simple meeting places in cities and towns and began to hold gatherings. In these meetings, the air was thick with excitement. The audience was told that the scheme was not only a way to gain wealth but also a way to unite people across tribes and borders in a new age of prosperity. People from all walks of life came to these gatherings. Elders, young men and women, market traders, and even some local government workers listened to the promises with open hearts. Many believed that they were witnessing the birth of something extraordinary. The promise was so attractive that many ignored the growing red flags of too good to be true magic. Then came the night that nobody would forget. It was a night when the scheme reached out to 1 million souls in a short span of time. Every day, more money was poured into Golden Promise, until one evening, as the golden sunset faded into darkness, an unsettling silence fell over the land. In a tiny neighborhood in Lagos, a mother who had given her life savings to the scheme sat in the dark, her eyes wide with sudden shock. She realized that the returns that were promised would never arrive. Across the continent, people began to notice the same horrifying truth: their money was gone. In that single, dreadful night, trust had shattered, and fear took its place. It was as if the air itself was filled with the bitter taste of betrayal and loss. In the days that followed, chaos took over. Angry voices filled the streets and village squares. The friends who had once been looked upon as heroes were now seen as cunning tricksters who had robbed the people of their sweat and dreams. Chidi, Emeka, and Obi found themselves trapped in a web of lies from which there was no easy escape. People demanded answers. The law, which had been slow to move when trust was intact, now began to close in on the trio. Some brave souls tried to gather evidence, while others banded together to form groups, intent on recovering what they had lost. The community that had once been united by hope now stood divided, with anger and despair on every corner. In their hideout, the three friends argued fiercely. Chidi's eyes, once filled with the spark of innovation, now shone with fear and regret. "We never meant to harm anyone," he pleaded, knowing well that even a good plan taken too far could become deadly. Emeka, with anger in his voice, blamed the situation on fate and pressed that they had simply followed their desires. Obi, silent and sorrowful, could only watch, feeling the weight of his conscience crushing him. Their separate views on what went wrong created a rift among them. It was clear that their plans had taken on a life of their own, a life filled with greed, deception, and betrayal. The friends began to drift apart as the pressure of the situation grew. The more they tried to fix the problem, the more they realized that the very essence of their scheme had poisoned their bonds of friendship. As word spread about the scheme and its collapse, law enforcement agencies from different regions began joining forces. There were police officers determined to find the masterminds behind Golden Promise. A determined detective named Ada, known for her sharp mind and honest heart, took the lead in the investigation. Ada traveled from one region to another, listening to stories of loss and despair. In every tale, there was a whisper of the three friends who had promised wealth but delivered only sorrow. She noted that many people had been duped because they had trusted a promise without question, a promise that shone too brightly for its own good. Ada's journey was long and painful. Every town she visited reminded her that such schemes could leave deep scars on the spirit of the people. As law enforcement closed in, Chidi found himself hiding in an abandoned building on the outskirts of the city. There, the quiet echoes of his footsteps reminded him of all that had been lost. He sat on a broken bench and recalled the days when he and his friends dreamt of a better life. But dreams built on lies can crumble under the weight of truth. One rainy night, as Chidi listened to the patter of raindrops, he thought of the mothers who had lost their life savings, the old men who had saved for a rainy day, and the children who would now grow up in hardship. Regret filled him like a rising tide. In the quiet moments, He longed to undo the damage, but the past was gone. The money, once trusted with hope, had disappeared into a void of deceit. Far from Chidi, Emeka had taken a different path. In a small town near the border, he was hiding among crowds. His bold spirit had grown timid, replaced by a deep-seated fear of being caught. He often walked the dusty roads alone, haunted by memories of the promising nights and the happy gatherings where he had once used his charm to attract investors. In moments of solitude, Emeka remembered the faces of those he had deceived. Each memory was a stab in his heart. The reckoning had begun not with a bang, but with quiet realization. He had built his wealth on promises that evaporated like steam. Now, the only company he had was remorse. Obi tried to run from his conscience in a way that was different from his two friends. With his quiet nature, he hid not far from his old neighborhood, where the echoes of laughter once rang out on busy streets. Instead of the loud chaos of a crowded city, Obi found himself in silent corners, reflecting on each decision made. Each face he met in the market, every familiar smile, reminded him of what once was. He had hoped that the scheme would be a way for everyone, even the poorest, to share in the wealth. Now, every promise had turned to dust. His heart was heavy with sorrow as he saw the pain in his neighbor's eyes, a pain that mirrored his own. The tale of Golden Promise did not stay contained in one village or town. As the scheme had spread from Nigeria to touch many African nations, the ripple effects of betrayal deepened. In countries far from the friend's hometown, people began to question every promise of easy money. In a small village in Ghana, a festival filled with music and dance was marred by the discovery that funds meant for the community had vanished. In Kenya, a market day turned into a day of angry protests when traders found that their weekly earnings were nothing more than an illusion. Across Africa, leaders and common folk alike were forced to confront the stark reality. Greed, when not checked by honesty, could destroy even the strongest bonds of trust. With the law closing in and trust shattered in every home, the story of the three friends became a dark lesson for the entire continent. People began to understand that there was no magic in easy promises. True wealth, as they learned the hard way, is built slowly with hard work, honesty, and care for one another. In the gatherings that replaced those once filled with hopeful slogans, elders spoke softly of the lesson learned. A promise that seems too bright may hide a deep darkness. Teachers in small schools began to warn children about the dangers of blindly following voices that promised quick gains. The story of Chidi, Emeka, and Obi was told and retold as a modern parabolic caution against the lure of greed and the importance of trust. Amid the chaos, there emerged voices calling for redemption. Some of the people who had fallen for the scheme organized community meetings to support one another, to rebuild their lives and trust. Ada, the determined detective, spoke at these gatherings. With a calm and steady tone, she reminded everyone that while justice must be served, there was also a chance for healing. In one such meeting, an elderly woman shared her story. "We lost more than money that night. We lost our belief in the promise of tomorrow. But now, we stand together, ready to rebuild our trust and our future." Her words, though filled with pain, also held a spark of hope that maybe, through unity and perseverance, they could rise again. As investigations deepened, the once feared Golden Promise crumbled further. The trio's secret accounts were frozen, their assets seized, and their names marred by the news. Public outcry reached every corner of the continent as citizens demanded that such schemes would never again shackle their dreams. Leaders convened to discuss ways to protect people from scams that preyed on their hardships. Laws were strengthened, and new safeguards were put in place for financial promises. The shock of that terrifying night had made it clear that transparency and honesty must stand guard over everyone's money. In the end, the three friends faced their own personal reckonings. Chidi, burdened by regret, chose to turn himself in, hoping that by speaking the truth, he might atone for the countless lives affected by his and his friends' actions. His confession was simple and earnest. He spoke of the dreams they had all once shared and of how greed had twisted those dreams into something dark and harmful. Emeka too was caught. His capture was met with mixed feelings among the people, anger for what he had done, but also a sad understanding that he was driven by the same deep desire for a better life. His trial became a symbol of the community's struggle to find justice, yet it also served as a reminder that even those who commit wrongs are often caught in the ties of their own failures. Obi's fate was less clear. Unlike his friends, he had stayed in the shadows, torn between the need to escape and the burden of guilt. In later days, he was found sitting alone in a humble home, far from the chaos of his past. With tear-streaked cheeks, Obi listened to the teachings of local elders and slowly began to rebuild a life founded on small acts of kindness. He spent long days helping others, sharing the hard lessons he had learned, and urging people never to let greed cloud their judgment. The story of the three friends and their grand scheme spread far and wide, becoming a modern folktale told by every village storyteller on busy city streets and in quiet rural corners. With each retelling, the listeners heard the caution in simple, clear words. Trust wisely. Never let promises that are too good to be true steal your caution. Work hard. True success comes from perseverance, honest work, and unity. Guard your dreams. Greed can turn even the brightest hopes into shadows of regret. Parents told their children of the dark night when wallets turned empty, using it as a lesson to question every whisper of easy money. Elders reminded the young that there is beauty in the slow, steady growth of honest efforts. And so, the tale of Golden Promise was woven into the fabric of everyday life, not as a celebration of cunning, but as a warninga story to be remembered when the lure of quick riches calls. Years later, long after the fall of the fraudulent scheme, the scars of Golden Promise had begun to heal. Communities that once felt betrayed found unity in rebuilding trust and supporting one another. Markets flourished again with local trade built on honest transactions, and children grew up listening not only to the dark tale of deception but also to the inspiring stories of recovery and resilience. The legacy of the three friends became one of bitter lessons, but also of hope. For in every dark story, there lies the possibility of a brighter future, a future where lessons are learned, and the seeds of truth bloom into trust and prosperity once again.